Well, thank you so much, Peg, and thank you for having me. This is such a wonderful reading series and a beautiful venue, and I feel so honored to be reading with such a great, diverse group of writers tonight. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming and for listening. So I'm just going to be reading from the beginning of my novel tonight, so it doesn't require too much setting up or context. The one thing you might want to keep in mind is that it's told from the first-person perspective, so everything is through Lucy, the protagonist's eyes. There you go. I was brain injured before it was trendy. Before the football players and the boxers and the soldiers started coming out, before other families emerged to talk about the devastation, before common people started looking for answers. I wasn't hit by shrapnel or gunfire, by a fist or a flying object. I was knocked unconscious by pavement and a wheel, by a driver who wasn't paying attention, by accident. I have no memory of before. For me, it all started after. I was hit by a truck. My neck snapped, my brain shook, and I almost died. I was 3. Dad believed I was destined to live, in part because the day it happened it was Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish festival of the trees, and according to some rabbinic law, he read, fruit from a tree isn't supposed to be eaten in the tree's first 3 years of life. In its 4th year, it goes to God, and after that, anyone can eat it. I was a couple of weeks from my 4th birthday, so maybe on that day I was a piece of fruit and my soul was still mine. Maybe for a moment I was one with a tree. At times I thought I almost remembered looking up and melding into branches, if only for a second, long enough to feel the leaves tickle, to hear the whisper of the birds, to be spared. But then people sometimes feel things when certain parts of the brain are stimulated. In otherworldly presence, supernatural power, supreme calm. A few years ago, I was in a traumatic brain injury group with a girl who saw Jesus every time she had magnet therapy. Maybe my savior was a tree. It was the weekend before the start of summer when things started spiraling. It was hotter than usual, slightly more humid, but other than that, the day began pretty typically. On Friday morning, Dad and I had coffee. It was almost the same routine as every other day. The two of us sitting at the kitchen table before he went out to run errands or go to meetings or whatever else he did for the day, before I was supposed to hunt for a job or get dropped off at a doctor's office, or once in a while go to the city with him. I was supposed to be preparing for an interview, though I couldn't think about doing anything before my coffee fix. No one could brew it the way he could, with a pinch too much cinnamon, extra strength for impact. It was an aroma I didn't tire of, the perfect temperature to warm the chill. Even on the sunniest days, it was drafty in that house, a little dark. I probably should have sat facing him rather than the windows, so he wouldn't have had to compete with the diversions outside, those blonde, unblemished kids riding their big wheels, the construction going on at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, the 2 squirrels scampering through the trees, and Nugget, the retriever from across the way, waiting for me on the fringe of our yard, ready to play. They would all have to wait for Dad to finish talking about miracles. He believed in those things, and in grand schemes. The lottery, organized religion, me. I wasn't sure what I believed in. Comic books, certain superpowers, a sixth sense for animals and toddlers and some people, caffeine. When I resumed my place at the table, Dad handed me an envelope, references he'd written himself, names of old friends signed at the bottom. This was how it worked with each new job prospect. Tiny alterations with every new want-ad. I was supposed to be working toward teaching, aiding in the classroom. I could do that, technically, on paper. I made it through high school and even college in 7 years, where I took a lot of art classes and majored in education. I liked art, and I liked kids, so teaching seemed to make sense, even though I never got the credential. I was qualified. If only I had that switch good teachers had, the one that gave them the ability to lead and delegate, to move forward in straight lines, to stay on task, to be prepared with extra handouts, to know just when to hug the kid who was having an off day. I was that kid. I was the one who moved sideways, lagged behind, forgot my buddy in the partner system, and lost the group. The one time I subbed, I lost the roll call sheet within the first hour, and one of the students during lunch, and the job by the end of the week. It was probably because I didn't have executive functions, which, among other basic skills, relate to organizing, prioritizing, reasoning, disciplining, goal setting, time managing, decision making, and impulse control. In a file somewhere, there's a report from the neuropsychologist who evaluated me. My executive function is severely impaired due to frontal lobe injury. When I pictured the inside of my head, I didn't see a lot of gray. When I pictured my brain, I saw a pinball machine lit up with pockets of potential. If you hit certain levers in particular spots, you could unlock special doors and this flood of creativity or conversation or crying might pour out. The rest of the board was filled with dead zones, where the lights were dimmed, where all of the functions I didn't have, all of the could-have-beens, lay dormant. There were parts of this job that seemed tailored to my skills because I did understand the keys to coloring outside the lines, grasped why the graham cracker apple juice ritual mattered, and needed and loved reading those storybooks as much as any child could. The pictures came first. I got that. Arts and crafts I could do well. I knew how to make a mess with clay and paints and sand. If I could have found a job that allowed me to play all day, that would have been perfect. If the hours were flexible enough, and I didn't have to be there all the time. If I never had to clean up. I was trying to find my special interview outfit this morning when I realized Harry had one of my shoes. I said, "Sometimes I wonder if he has a dog complex. You think I should buy him some cat toys so he doesn't get confused?" I motioned to take a sip of coffee. "Is there more in the pot? You want more?" Dad had only taken a couple of sips. "So you have the shoe now?" "Yeah. And when exactly is the interview?" "I guess I'm supposed to call, but you haven't yet." "No, because it's really far away. And besides what? I'll never get it anyway." "What?" When he was annoyed, he claimed he couldn't hear me. "What are you saying? Can we change the subject? I'm done with this." "You're done with this? Then what are we doing here?" I wasn't sure, actually. So many times I wanted to ask him if we could start over, to tell him to stop marking up the classifieds with hopeless red stars and circles, to help me find a new path that didn't involve the switch, that maybe didn't involve a job either. But then we would have had to consider an alternative, a route that accepted my limitations, one that was different from his and everyone else's we knew, and we couldn't do that then because admitting defeat meant giving in to disability. It was okay being known as someone who was a little different or who marched to the beat of her own drum or who had been through a lot, as long as she had other things going for her too. Challenging, sure, maybe even challenged, but never disabled. The job search had been an integral piece of our morning ritual for 2 years, ever since I had finished my coursework. It was a complex exchange full of limited expectation, consistent disappointment, generalized coddling, and overall dysfunction. But it was comfortable. Not that I could have articulated any of that to him then. "I don't know why we keep doing this," I said.